I'm Tamara, and you're listening to TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. From health and wellness to community and social responsibility, this podcast shares stories, busts myths, and delivers practical tips to Canadians when they need it most, bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders. Hi, everyone. Today we are meeting two up-and-comers, Harvard students and Canadian volunteers who have created a platform to capture this unique moment in time. Please welcome Catherine and Aisha. Hi, you guys. How are you?
Hi, Tamara. Thank you so much for having us on your show. It's great to meet you.
Good I'm really happy you guys are here. So, Catherine, you are in Vancouver. Aisha, you are in Cambridge right now. And why don't we start with what Dear Canadians is, or how it came to be? Why did you come up with this idea? Catherine, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very core. It's a digital platform for Canadians of all ages and in all provinces and territories to connect through virtual postcards. And while you see only Aisha and I here, we're actually a team of 7 university students. And on our team, we have technologists and designers and artists and social scientists who've all come together. We wanted to build a platform in this time of need where some of our regular in-person communities are harder to come together.
So, Aisha, how did you and Catherine meet? Like, are you all Vancouverites or all Canadians that met at Harvard? How did this happen?
This is actually a really great question because Kat and I lived on top of Kat all of last year in our dorms, yet we were never really friends, kind of would awkwardly pass one another in the stairwell. And then through this project, we became connected through mutual friends. And now I think one of the most special parts of what we've done is just the friendships and relationships we've built as a team of 7. And which is just so funny thinking back on all the times we were pretty much anonymous to one another at school.
Wow. Okay. So explain this. So if I wanted to participate in this, how would I do it as a Canadian? What would I need to do, Aisha?
Yeah. So essentially, you would go to www.dearcanadians.ca or Chers Canadiens, because we have it in both French and English. And you would scroll onto that page. You could first explore our gallery of beautiful postcards, which have been created by Canadians from every province, as Kat has mentioned. And then you could create a postcard yourself. And this entails choosing either your own image or an image from online, and that being the front of your postcard. And then when you flip it over, you also can write a message to Canadians. And we have a series of prompts, which we thought would bring about interesting reflections from Canadians, but really you can write whatever you feel is pertinent to you. You put your location in, you send off the card, and one of us on our team will read through it, approve it, and then you'll join all the other stories from Canadians.
And Catherine, what are some of the messages you're seeing on these postcards?
Yeah, it's funny you asked, Tamara, because we've actually been extremely surprised by the quality of the cards. When we created this platform, we really had no idea what we were going to get. If we were going to get like we would have been very happy with cards that just said thank you or just said proud to be Canadian. But what we actually found is that we've been getting a lot of stories and people have been putting a lot of thought into these cards. I think the 2 most popular prompts that people are choosing are what are you grateful for? And then also, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of Canada? And so I think we've heard some really heartfelt messages of people's experiences during these times, what kinds of people and who really stood out to Canadians and are on top of mind for them. But then also amid the social movements that are going on and everything else that we as a nation are trying to figure out together, how Canada can do better. I think that's an important question that we're really excited to see people engage in on the platform.
And when you think about this project. I'm trying to think what's the best word to describe it. It is, because this is really, it's a gift to Canadians in a lot of ways, that what you're doing. How does it, Aisha, maybe you can talk about how, like when you started this, did you think about what the end goal would be, or is there an end goal, or what are some of the things that you hope this will do?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I can tell you, we put a lot of thought as a team into the why of our project. And I would say, Kat, we'd be having a meeting, we'd be talking about what do we want to do, what do we want this to look like, and Kat would be like, hold on, let's step back, take a bigger picture, glance at this, and what are we really wanting to achieve in terms of the more social effects of our project. And I would say there's a lot to it, but the one that is most interesting to me, perhaps, is this envisioning of a new kind of social connection online. And I think that we, as youth, grew up in this age of social media, and we see both its benefits and its drawbacks. And we wanted to try to envision this new kind of sociality online, where that transcends social silos that are created by traditional social media, and kind of gets us out of these echo chambers, that also is less ephemeral and more permanent, something we can look back on in the future. It's also supposed to be a space of deeper reflection. And I think that Canadians, as Kat has mentioned, it's a time of reckoning for us. And it's a time of deep reflection on the ways in which we exist within this world. And I think that there needed to be a more deliberate space and intentional space for that. So on the one hand, we have this kind of envisioning of a new kind of social media. Also, I forgot to mention, without likes and without this need for validation. And I think we can wire ourselves towards like feeling this boost when we are validated by others online, but also just sharing for the sake of sharing, and sharing because people's stories are valid. Every voice deserves to be heard. And that doesn't require us to like find our worth based off of what others are saying about us. And so this is one side of the why. And then I think the other side of it, I think, Kat, maybe you want to build on this, is just this idea of connection and Canadians seeking connection at a time where we are socially distanced. Kat, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that really inspired us and that stood out for us is the 7 p.m. cheer and people going outside to clap for healthcare workers and for essential workers. And things like that just really made us think like Canadians are really clearly seeking to feel a part of something bigger and a part of a bigger community. But it's like, how can we extend the sentiments from that 7 p.m. cheer and from other things like that? And specifically, is there a better way that we can use technology as that's really just the medium that we have to use today?
And as part of that, I think we see ourselves as youth as uniquely positioned to create a project like this. And for us, something at the forefront of our minds was intergenerational solidarity, because the COVID crisis, this calls on everyone to be working together. And I think that we wanted to show other youth that there is a way to use our kind of experience with social media as a force for positive change and for the social good. And I think sometimes we as youth are kind of pigeonholed as not using social media in effective ways and being overly obsessed with our phones and social media. And I think we want to show that that's not always the case, and that there are youth who are really wanting to use these platforms in productive ways and use them as a superpower rather than something that consumes us more negatively.
Yeah, I love that. And so just from what you both said right there, I have about 15 new questions. But I find it really interesting because, my kids are young. You're both older than my kids, yet you have the same experience as them. And that is, you were growing up in a time where you have access to a computer in your hand and access to a lot of different people's opinions, should you choose to put yourself out there, which most people do, because there's this idea that if you aren't involved in social media, you won't have any friends. This is kind of like, I mean, you have to recognize my girls are 10 and 12, right? And so this is a very like, they don't have phones and they don't have, and I've been very clear about that. But then I get these, I get other parents say to me, well, this is how kids communicate these days, Tamara. And if you don't let your kids have this, then they aren't going to be able to communicate with their friends. And it's an interesting time, right? Because people of my generation, like I'm Gen X, right? My 10-year-old loves to talk in generations, right? Oh, look there's a boomer and there's Gen X and there's Gen X. She's so funny that way, right? And so we just had this big conversation about the different generations. So I grew up where, we just started to see like these computers and stuff. So yes, of course, when I see somebody your age on your phone, I'm like, oh, you're totally addicted. Well, I am too, and so what is that like tell me, okay, first of all, do you mind me asking how old you both are and when you first started on social media and how you navigated that through some, teen years are pretty tough. That's a big question. That is a big question I just asked.
It's a great question. Kat, I'll start us off, I guess.
Sure.
I'm 19, and I would say I first became acquainted with social media when I was 14, which was actually a little bit late to the game. I'm one to always follow the law, and I did. 13 was kind of the age restriction, and so I figured I would get it after that. It also, I think what was interesting for us is we're kind of the generation where our friends had flip phones too. It wasn't quite the era of the smartphone. And so it wasn't quite as ubiquitous as even what your daughters would be facing right now. And it was really tough to navigate social media. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking of. I think it leads to a certain, at least speaking solely from my personal experience, it leads to a kind of performance amongst friends, especially when I think of something like Instagram, where the kind of authenticity of our relationships is undermined because people are doing things together for the sole purpose of taking a photo and sharing it. It's also often weaponized as a way to make others feel excluded, whether intentionally or not. People sharing photos together, it might seem like they're just a close group of friends who are bonding, but there's always a story behind that of someone else getting left out and seeing that, and this perpetual feeling that you're not part of something. And I definitely experienced that. It was very isolating at times, which is the irony of social media, is that it is supposed to be social, but I think it leads to a lot of hurt. And I think the way I've navigated it is being for one thing, being very intentional about how often I use my phone. Even now, my friends and I, we have a policy when we go to dinners together, spend time together, we all say, okay, take your phone, put it in the middle of the table. If you pick up your phone during this time, you have to buy everyone dessert. And people bought me cake before as a result. But we kind of create those norms amongst us, which help us to really stay present in the moment. And then also just learning to take a break from social media and validate myself on my own and not rely on the feedback of others to feel good about myself.
Catherine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm 21. I've actually had a bit of a non-traditional experience with social media. I think I really didn't get on the traditional platforms until very recently. I don't know if this would even be considered social media, but I think like my first venture into the internet and kind of creating content on the internet, I actually wrote a blog when I was 11 and kind of kept that for a year or two. Actually, like none of my friends even know about it. It's like in the very obscure part of the internet now, and I mean, it always was in an obscure part of the internet. But I think like that was like the first time that I was like interacting with like strangers on the internet and putting my thoughts on the internet. But again, like I think echoing much of what Aisha said, I just never really I just never really found traditional social media to be a space where I feel like I can connect with people in a way that makes sense for me. But like, and as you mentioned, Tamara, it is really hard though, especially in recent years, and especially this year when we're all online. I really found that I just, by necessity, had to go on social media more to engage with my friends, to be connected. I think, and especially now, like I'm a senior, I'm a fourth year in university, and so thinking about postgrad plans and thinking about like professional networks, and that's another kind of social media. So I definitely get just how ubiquitous it is and how hard it is to avoid, but which like really makes it even more important to kind of use it intentionally.
Yeah, it is such a good point. And I mean, that's why I love what you've done here with this platform, Dear Canada, because, I guess it's not really social media, but it is social and it is online. But what you're asking for, I mean, and really people can be as open as they want on Dear Canada. They, like you said, right, Catherine, you were saying people were writing some really meaningful things, whereas you weren't expecting that really. So as we, as what are you guys taking? Can I ask what you're both, what you're taking at school?
For sure.
Okay, go
I'm
Aisha. Oh, go Catherine.
Kat.
Oh, good. I study sociology and computer science. And so I think actually thinking about the future of social media and social platforms, and how we connect and kind of how the internet is affecting us, and particularly children, is something that I think about a lot, both academically and otherwise.
Aisha?
Yeah, so I've designed my own major in what's called resilience studies, RESILENCE studies. And I'm also doing a minor in anthropology. And the question that really drove my creating my own major is, how do we overcome adversity? And that's kind of the question that haunts me, and a question I was hoping to find some answers for through Dear Canadians.
Right. So how have your families and friends reacted to Dear Canada? Catherine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, obviously, I mean, they're probably a bit tired of hearing about it now, but obviously they were the first to test it out and to give us feedback. I think something that we really wanted to do for Dear Canada is to like really try to solve a need and really kind of build something, that to build something that people want to use, rather than just kind of our idea of what people want. So kind of from in every stage of the process, as we were iterating the platform, we really went to our family and friends first to kind of put prototypes in front of them and be like, would you use this? Like, where would you click? Like, does this make sense? Like, does this read well? And so I think they've been instrumental in this process. And again, like I feel like, we really can't, under exaggerate. I'm at a loss for words, but we really can't forget our teammates who are also working on this. I feel like it's really been a team effort of everyone and all of our networks and all of our friends, who have helped us, both kind of our friends who are our age, but then also professors that we know, and other more proper adults who we know who have been giving us very valuable advice, also experts in the field of social products and of these kind of platforms. So we're really grateful for everyone's help.
Yeah, I'll also add in terms of reactions from friends and family, I've been fortunate enough to actually work with a family member on this project who's my brother Jasper. And for me, it's just been the greatest joy because he's just graduated from Harvard, and we're going to be living in separate cities for the first time in 2 years. And it was just such a joy to get to work with him on this project.
No kidding.
And our family then was very excited about it, with both of us doing this together. Our friends as well. I think I was very excited to see some of my friends I'd be like, please go do it, and they would go do it, and then they would write back to me a few hours later and be like, oh my gosh, I get it. And I would kind of mention it to them in passing, but once you actually do it, you get it and you start to feel like you're part of something. And that was something I wasn't necessarily expecting, but that was really cool.
I'll tell you what everybody is thinking right now. Your parents had 2 children go to Harvard. Wow, that is impressive. That's what everybody's thinking right now. So you guys, so you're at Harvard and so you've gone back. You're going back to, you're back in the US, Aisha? And then Catherine, are you doing your studies this year from from your parents' home in Vancouver? So that wasn't
Exactly.
the plan. So
No,
I
that
mean,
was
right? This
absolutely
is
not the plan.
really, this is not the Harvard experience that you were probably expecting. So walk me through that, what that's like for both of you. So Catherine, why don't we start with you and walk me through, like, here you are, you're at Harvard, you're starting your senior year, and you're doing it from your parents' home. How is this working for you? What does
Yeah,
what does this mean,
Yeah, I think first of all, I just really want to acknowledge that the fact that I'm able to do this, like, I'm really lucky to be able to do this. I'm really privileged in many respects. Many have it much, much more challenging than me. So I definitely can't complain too much. But as you say, like, exactly, this is not how I or anyone else really had hoped that this year was going to be. And I think especially thinking about our senior year, like we were looking forward to being the oldest on campus and kind of feeling connected, or probably more connected than at any point in our college careers, in a physical setting. And so I think it was really disappointing to be split up from our friends and to be kind of thrown all around the world. And actually, this was kind of the first problem that we thought about as a team, to try to figure out what can we do. Like, the very, very beginnings of this project, before we thought about Dear Canada, was how can we feel connected to our school. I don't know what it was like for you and your kids and your schools, but what happened for us was, basically, as soon as we were sent home, and kind of even before that, any email that went to the entire school would just be filled with more and more bad news. And kind of, it was like they would all say, "Dear members of the Harvard community," and then be like, something else is canceled, we have more restrictions, or things are going on. And "Dear members of the Harvard community" really just became kind of associated with, like something else has happened. And so that's actually where kind of the phrase like "Dear Harvard" or "Dear Canada" came from. Initially, we actually also built kind of like a test platform, or a pilot platform, specifically at Harvard, to connect the Harvard community and to put everyone into one space and into like one platform that was more positive and more forward looking, to a time where we would be together, and to a time where we would feel more connected, rather than just kind of everyone talking about how something else has happened and how our year is going to change again and again and again.
Aisha?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to be sent home, but I also think it puts a lot in perspective. And I, too, as like Kat, need to acknowledge how fortunate I am. I have a group of friends who are also mostly international students, and we were able to find a place off campus in Cambridge to live and study for the semester. One of the main interests in that was time zones, and otherwise I'd be taking class at 6:00 a.m., which I had to do last semester, and because of the time difference, and that was not fun. And some of my friends are in Singapore and Germany, and it doesn't make sense for them to be having to navigate those time differences either. So I feel very fortunate to be here, and like I've created kind of the best possible case scenario for myself. But of course, there is a huge sense of loss in the community. And you can kind of you can't really let yourself think about the things that you would be missing out on otherwise. But I also think it's a fascinating time to be learning. And as someone who studies resilience, like this is the petri dish of resilience. This is like us putting to test every inspirational quote we ever like pinned on Pinterest kind of thing. And I think it's especially with the social justice movements happening right now, it's so fascinating to be a
Mhm.
Harvard student and to get to discuss these issues with our professors. And so while it isn't ideal, it's, I think each of us are really trying to embrace it. And for me personally, I know many students are choosing to take a leave of absence, but I couldn't really imagine taking a leave of absence at this time because I'm just so excited about the learning that can still happen.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth and learning, and this is how we become resilient, in my opinion, right? As we are challenged and we rise and we change and we this is how we learn, and we fall down and we get back up, and this is. I mean, none of us know what we're doing, really. That's what I have to, remind myself of, right? We're all experiencing this together for the first time. It's a worldwide pandemic, and we're seeing how we react with each other, right? And that's the most interesting part for me, is how we are all responding to rules and opinions and all kinds of stuff. You guys I could talk to you obviously forever about, because I'm so fascinated about your journey to Harvard and how you're and just like, I want to talk about, what you are studying at school and all that sort of stuff. But we're here about Dear Canada. It's dearcanadians.ca. For anyone that is wanting to go. What is your hope? So for people listening, what do you want someone listening to do? You obviously want them to go to dearcanadians.ca, and then what? And then
Um,
what, Aisha? What do you want them to do when they're there?
yeah, I think first of all, in order to go there and actually write a card, you need to be committed to the idea that your voice matters. Your voice really does matters. We want to hear your story. Other Canadians want to hear your story. So the first step is to just know that. And then with that in mind, write a card that I think the most interesting thing that you can do in a card personally is write a card that your future self would want to read. And that will keep you accountable to your past self when you're reading it in the future. And I think that many of us, as I said earlier, are having these moments of reckoning and profound reflection. And we need to hold on to that. That's how we're going to be able to transform for the better from these challenging times. And so I would say go to the website and write a card to your future self. And then tell your friends to write one too.
I love it. Catherine, what do you want other Canadians to know about dearcanadians.ca?
Yeah, I think echoing what Aisha is saying, this is really your space to make of it however you wish. But even if you just want to look at some other people's cards, I think you'll also be surprised, as we were, by just the depth of and diversity of experiences from Canadians across the coasts in this time. But we really do look forward to hearing your stories, I think. And Aisha's kind of mentioning this a little bit, that the most powerful cards that we found are people's personal stories, and people being open and vulnerable and sharing their real challenges, but then also the good things that are happening right now, because there are still good things that are happening amid everything that's going on. So we just really look forward to hearing about you and what your experiences are, no matter if that's a long story or the short story. I think something else that we also really want to stress is that like, you don't have to be a great writer. We're not looking for anything polished. Like,
You're not grading
like, even
it.
if it just
It's not getting a grade.
exactly. Like, even if it's just a sentence, like, we really want your voice to be a part of this platform.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love it. And also, for every card written, TELUS is donating $1 to support COVID-19 relief for vulnerable communities and youth across Canada through the TELUS Friendly Future Foundation. So there's another incentive to go and share your story. And TELUS will donate $1 to people who need it in Canada. So I just want to thank both of you so much. Again, it's dearcanadians.ca. You can also follow the project on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Dear Canadians. Catherine, Aisha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. It was great to chat with you, Tamara. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.